literature on this, and we did a full literature review. What we found was actually, yes, the recovery was faster, but that's obvious. You're going to cut only the epithelium that needs to be cut, and not more, which often with a well in alcohol, you're taking more. So that's obvious. But there was no real difference in outcomes or haze, and there was maybe a difference in pain, but again, that's a slower recovery. So this is the publication which came out of the company that was pushing that still is pushing trans-PRK. And they compared LASIK with trans-PRK. The idea being that you're making sure that you say that trans-PRK is as good as LASIK. And in their figure 3, they said that 83% in the transepithelial group and 85% in the femtosecond group were within a half diopter. Now that, that is based on a t-test. Now, t-test only tells you if the means are different. It doesn't, it's a test as to whether the average of one group is different from the average of another group. So the average was not different. But if you look in the same publication, you can see that in the transepithelial group, they slightly overcorrected the patients and they slightly undercorrected in the myopic group. This already gives you more eyes that are 20/20, right? Because of that overcorrection. The other thing that you notice is that the standard deviation of the mean is much higher in the trans-PRK group than in the LASIK group, and also for cylinder. Now, when I saw this, I looked at this figure in the paper, and it shows you categorically that trans-PRK is less accurate than LASIK, period. All of the serious outliers were the blue dots, the trans-PRK. So while the publication is trying to make you think that they're the same, they did honestly at least provide the evidence for those of us to critically evaluate the paper and show that actually trans-PRK is worse than LASIK. Now, until we're using actual epithelial power or actual stromal breakthrough patterns to calculate the refractive effect of the stroma being removed before all the epithelium is gone, we will not have accuracy with trans-PRK that we have with LASIK. Or, by the way, with normal PRK, meaning you remove the epithelium with alcohol and you do your ablation and let it grow back. Which has been shown to be the same as LASIK. So this is myth number 1 busted. Okay, trans-PRK not as accurate as LASIK. End of discussion. Now, the last thing I want to make is this thing where everybody claims to invent something when it's been done before. And I want you to see that removal of the epithelium with excimer is very old. Okay, this is as old as 1998. Don Johnson actually really was the first one to pioneer this technique. And the idea was that it's no-touch PRK. And he found that the results were less accurate, and so he abandoned it. So you see, what's interesting is you've got a company that's marketing trans-PRK heavily because it's, technically zero for the surgeon, so it's very attractive for surgeons who don't have a lot of LASIK experience. And they're gaining market share without really admitting that they're doing something that's not new, and also hiding the fact that the results are worse. So let's just be clear about trans-PRK. Now, let's get on to wavefront guided, because wavefront guided is a beautiful story. Because by the way, I'm old enough that I was there to watch the first presentation of the first wavefront guided treatment at the ISRS. And so I've been following the story very carefully. But to get there, I think it's important to look at some facts, okay? Now, there was a time when the company, I can mention it now because they don't sell their lasers anymore, it's called Vizix. They were saying that wavefront-guided hyperopic treatments are better because they take care of angle kappa. And this was at the ESCRS, and it was very embarrassing because I was up against a very well-known colleague of ours, and I I just had to, explain why this was not correct. And so it's embarrassing because, the companies feed the doctors information, they repeat it without quite understanding it. So you're now going to understand this. Here's an ORB scan from 25 years ago. Now this patient is going to have hyperopic treatment. Now in this eye, in the top eye, the left eye, there's practically no angle kappa. So if you center the procedure on the center of the pupil, you're going to get a good centration. But in the right eye, there was a large angle kappa. In other words, the visual axis is here, but the center of the pupil is way over here, 0.75 millimeters. Wavefront guided treatments, the wavefront of the eye when it's done with a whole eye aberrometer, the calculation of the aberrations is around the center of the aperture. That's how the mathematics works. And so if you do a treatment on the wavefront, the coma from this eye, because of the centration on the visual axis, the coma, as measured from the pupil center, will be corrected, meaning you will be shifting the vertex of this cornea from where it was born to another position. Shifting the vertex of the cornea doesn't sound like a good idea, and it isn't. This is what you get when you use a Vizix laser to treat hyperopia when there's an angle kappa. You get massive decentrations. Okay? So what happened in this case was that the surgeon said, well, the wavefront guided is better. So instead of realizing that there was a large angle kappa and that wavefront was based on the center of the pupil, he couldn't realize it necessarily because the company was telling him that wavefront guided is better for reducing higher order aberrations. So what he did was another treatment, and this banged the wavefront, he banged the decentration even harder into the cornea. And he did it twice. Okay? So wavefront guided treatment followed by an enhancement, followed by an enhancement. Really, I mean, hammering it's like really like ignoring the fact that there's a reason why you're getting a bad outcome. Okay? So this is one very important thing to understand about wavefront guided treatments, is that the wavefront is measured from the center of the pupil. The topography wavefront is measured for the center of the topography, which is, by definition, the vertex of the cornea. So I want to illustrate this with a publication that we put out a few years ago to demonstrate this, where you had a decentration, which you can all see. And no, it's not ectasia, it's a decentration. And the wavefront measurement at the time, 20 years ago, the highest resolution wavefront sensor in the world was the COAS, or the WASCA, by Zeiss and Wavefront Sciences. As you can see here, there was very high order RMS, but the coma was practically zero. However, if we take the wavefront from the corneal topography, and you can see that there's an inferior angle kappa in this eye, you had masses of coma on the corneal wavefront. And that's because the corneal wavefront is measured from the vertex, not from the center of the pupil. Measure the wavefront from the center, no coma. Measure it from the vertex, lots of coma. Why? Because the treatment was centered on the pupil. The treatment was centered up here, and therefore it was perfectly centered on the pupil, but poorly centered for the visual optics of the patient, who was Norwegian and worked in the north of Norway in construction and couldn't drive at night. So when I calculated the wavefront guided profile from his eye and the topography guided profile from his eye, I got two completely different answers as to what to do on the cornea. Now, this is a very important moment for you to understand, is that you've got a company, Vizix, telling us for 20 years that the best treatment in the world is wavefront guided. And they will not remove that statement. 20 years later, they're still saying it. And then you've got companies that are providing corneal wavefront guided treatments. And this patient comes to you and you have both technologies. Which one are you going to use to treat? Well, I mean, I think it's obvious you're going to use this one. And that's what we did. We did a corneal wavefront guided treatment. We reduced the Olympic gold medal coma down to normal. Here's the corneal wavefront normalized. And interestingly, the spherical aberration went down a lot too, measured about the pupil. But what we're seeing here is a recentration with a difference map that is the mirror image of the ablation profile, and the problem solved. The problem was solved by treating on the vertex. So the problem with wavefront guided treatments is that the mathematics are such that you always have to calculate it from the center of the pupil. All the aberrations are calculated. They have to be symmetrical. And I'm going to talk about how that problem has been addressed later. So obviously, if you have a decentration, a wavefront guided treatment is the wrong treatment. That's clear. Does anybody object to to my conclusion there? I don't think I can hear attendees, or you can put comments. By the way, put questions in the comments in the chat as well if you think that I'm not making something clear. Okay, so now let's move on to why even customize? Why customize eyes? Why? Well, because you're going to get supervision. You're going to get more eyes 2016. Because the problem is the aberrations in the eye, and that's why we need to do the aberration corrections. Well, let's look at the reality. The reality is, here's almost 300 eyes, and this is microns of wavefront aberration in normal virgin eyes. Normal virgin eyes have an average of 0.3 RMS, and the biggest aberration that normal eyes have is spherical aberration. The rest are really small and insignificant, on average. Now, it doesn't mean that there might not be one eye here that has very high coma. Okay, or an eye here that has very high trefoil. Okay, I get it. But most eyes don't have significant higher order aberrations. The most important one is spherical aberration. Remember that. So the history of corneal excimer surgery started with using what's called the Munnerlin formula, which, let me be clear, was not invented by Munnerlin. People coming in? Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So the spherocylindrical profile, spheres and cylinders, was the original way that excimer lasers were cutting cornea. Now, this is version 1 of the wavefront, was by 2 companies. They were measuring the wavefront with, one of them with a super low resolution aberrometer, one of them with a fairly okay one. And what are the higher order aberrations? I just showed you. The higher order aberrations are fairy dust. This tiny, tiny little irregularities here and there. And when they did the first wavefront guided treatments, they found that the results were worse than the results of non-wavefront guided, just Munnerlin. Why? Because what they didn't know was that when you add higher order aberrations to a treatment, you alter the sphere and cylinder in certain ways. If you add quadrifoil, you're adding cylinder. And so some aberrations, and if you add spherical aberration, it adds sphere. So we need to understand now the relationship between higher orders and lower orders, and they didn't know this. And so the first version was a complete failure, not only because the results were less good, but also because the higher order RMS went up despite it being a wavefront guided treatment. Now, it took a microsecond to understand why. All myopic ablations induce spherical aberration unless you're taking care of that. And so these standard profiles would induce a lot of spherical aberration out here. And the little aberrations were pointless. They got lost, completely lost in the faux soup. So the question here was, we have to control the spherical aberration. And to do that, they had to increase the peripheral ablation. Now, one company called that, Zeiss, we call that ASA, Aberration Smart Ablation Profile. Wavelight called it wavefront optimized. And Vuzix, the marketing kings of the universe, called it wavefront guided. So this is where the deception started. And I was sitting in the audience at the American Academy, and I could see it happening. There was a debate of wavefront guided versus wavefront optimized. And they were really talking about the same thing, but Vuzix was trying to convince the audience that they were doing something special because they had the higher order aberrations. Yet they were both doing exactly the same thing. Nothing different. Absolutely nothing different. So, what happened? Now that you do the okay, so now that you're doing the optimization of the profile, now you're not inducing as much spherical aberration, and now still you're inducing spherical aberration, you're still drowning the very small little fairy dust aberrations. But this debate between wavefront optimized and wavefront guided went on for 10 years, even though it was a false debate, because they were the same, except for little tiny little nothings. And remember, normal eyes don't have a lot of higher order aberrations. Now, I'm going to go jump straight to the latest version of this wavefront guided customization story. And there's very little actual information as to how this works, but talking to colleagues, I think I've understood what they're doing. They're taking the Pentacam wave, which is, a commercial product, and they relabel it as a new device. And then what they're doing is they're taking the corneal topography and the tomography, the front and back surface. They're measuring the wavefront aberrations with the aberrometer that's inside here. They've got the axial length from the interferometer. And of course, you have the lens position anterior chamber. So by having all of this, you can do a ray trace of the whole eye. Good. And the good thing about this is that the ray trace is centered on the vertex of the cornea. So here's what's interesting, right? It's 2026. Many of us have been explaining about centration of wavefront and how this is wrong since 2000, since this whole thing started. Many of us have published papers showing that centration has to be on the vertex, not the center of the pupil. We've been talking about this forever, and yet it is only now that finally a whole eye wavefront guided treatment is centered on the vertex of the cornea. I'm not sure Alcon realizes this, but I have a patent with Hartmut Vogelsang and Dan Neal, which we wrote about 10 years ago, on how to recalculate the aberrations to the vertex. So I'm not sure they know that, but I just realized as I'm talking here, I just remembered that. Okay, so you see, wavefront guided, so wavelight plus or whatever they call it, yes, the idea is to correct the higher order aberrations that can cause double vision, halos, and starbursts. But where this statement goes wrong is that if you don't have them, you will not experience sharper vision with excellent visual quality necessarily. That's the bit where that is not quite true. And part of the reason is because of what I've just shown you, which is that most people don't have higher order aberrations that change their visual quality at all. So pretending that you're putting something in when you're not putting anything in is not honest. I'm sorry. I mean, I find it kind of offensive that we are treated like idiots. Anyway, this is one of the publications that came out in 2023. And what they're showing us is that 90% of the eyes are 2016. And that's pretty impressive, I gotta say, because in fact, the word in English is it's unbelievable. Partially because if it's true, it's wow, but also because it's not believable, because if you look at the distribution, that's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel about it. If you look at the distribution of visual acuity in the human population, about 50 to 60% of humans see 20/60, no more. Why? Well, it's to do with the retinal resolution. It's not about the higher order aberrations of the eye. It's about the resolution of the retina. If it was about higher order aberrations, then how would it be possible for a Vizix 2020B in 1995 to treat a -5, induce about a micron of spherical aberration, and still have the patient seeing 20/16? Right? The brain filters higher order aberrations to a great extent, especially spherical aberration. So this paper really caught my eye, and I had an idea. Of course, they have 100% 20/20. I had an idea. I was like, okay, let's look at this paper critically. Okay, so the normogram is set perfectly. The R-squared is really, really good. The accuracy, that's interesting. They got 96% within a half. Wow. Not even refraction is that accurate. So that means that they're not refracting. They're not pushing plus, pushing sil. I can see that. Anyway, we go through the paper. We look at they were kind of overcorrecting the cylinder in the higher range. Okay, fine. They got absolutely zero cyclotorsion errors, which is interesting. Now, let's go to the importance of baseline vision, because you see, they had, if you look here now really carefully, the pre-op was 90%. And the post-op was 89. So they started with a population of 90% 2016. I think I misread that earlier. Now, when we look at our SMILE study of almost 4,000 eyes, and we measure refraction to the bottom line, we get 67% 2016, and we're pushing, okay? So our population had less eyes that were 2016 to start with, and we achieved whatever it is. But if you see, if we take out all of the eyes that were not 2016 before, then what would our results be? Our results would have been 80% 2016 and 100%, 100% 2020. So just by changing the analysis population, okay, so we took out 1,000 eyes here and only analyzed 2,000 eyes, we got the same results. So you know that SMILE is not a wavefront guided treatment. You know that. And you know that this is, but the results are the same. So it just proves the point that we've known for 25 years, which is that treating normal eyes with a wavefront is not necessary, and it doesn't give you better results. You can fake it by altering the people that you're admitting into the trial. So your statistics are actually true, but you cheated at the beginning. And so, I'm sorry to use these rather harsh words, but I think they are accurate. I think it's cheating. So when we look at our outcomes at 2016 only, it's 80% 2016 in 2,000 eyes, by the way, not whatever it was in the small study. This is 2,000 eyes, 2016 only. Of course, by the way, our nomogram is better set for cylinder than the wavelight one. So you see, the summary here is that the aim of wavefront in the wavelight system is to remove all of the aberrations to get a perfect focus. And that is just not the aim, because some aberrations are beneficial. And everyone loves these new EDOF lenses now because they're not diffractive. Guess what EDOF lenses are? They're lenses that put spherical aberration into the eye and give you extended depth of field without changing contrast. Whereas the aspheric lenses that were used before did not change the spherical, they were spherical aberration neutral. And in fact, one lens was minus 0.27 spherical aberration to zero out the average corneal spherical aberration to make an eye zero spherical aberration, which is even worse because you have no EDOF. So this is where Presbyon comes in, right? If you don't have spherical aberration, unless you have spherical aberration, you don't get focus to an exact point. Sorry, if you have an aspheric lens that is perfect, everything's focused to a point. If you have a spherical lens, like a sphere, yeah, a spherical lens, the angle of incidence peripherally is different, and you actually get more than one focus. The peripheral rays are focused closer. So that is EDOF, by the way. That's EDOF. So why do we want to make an eye perfect, no aberrations? You remove all of the depth of field. And I will. Can someone see who that is? I will be giving another webinar on explaining how we use spherical aberration to our advantage. But the point here is that spherical aberration gives us the advantage of depth of field, and this is how Presbyon works. That's why Presbyon is better than Presby Max. That's much better. And Presby Max and Supercore are not good treatments because they're multifocal corneas. They're not continuous EDOF. They're bifocal corneas. So I'm going to go through this in a different lecture. So because we lost a lot of time, I'm just going to skip through this again. This is explaining how we discovered this and what the truth is and how we do this, and obviously the results, which are incredible. I mean, really incredible for Presbyon. The best treatment for anybody who has presbyopia in the absence of cataract with no loss of contrast, stereo acuity maintained, and these results are consistent around the world. It's not just one clinic, everywhere. And it makes a huge amount of business for us because it's more than 50% of what we do at the London Vision Clinic. So I will do all of that in great detail in the next lecture. Let's go through topography guided because, again, the Wavelight Plus system, before it was Contura. And Contura, again, was telling the world that everyone should have a wavefront guided customized treatment. And they were marketing it that way. You even introduced me that way to this lecture, which I found kind of ironic. So it's the same story, right? By the way, the very first company to do a topography guided treatment was Meditech. Okay, so Meditech has the whole history of refractive surgery with all of the firsts, and that's another whole beautiful story. But the original topography guided treatment was based on the shape of the cornea. We then switched to corneal wavefront in 2005. We published the results, and they were amazing, and we got huge zone enlargement, and we got huge recentration accuracy. Really beautiful. But these are for higher order aberrations that are terrible. These are patients who have symptomatic higher order aberrations. That is the indication for topography guided treatment. Not treating fairy dust aberrations in a normal eye, charging them more for not getting a better result. That's what I find sad, is the truth. What is manifest refraction? Because you see, what we're hearing from Wavelight Plus now is that you can just do the machine and you don't have to refract. And I will find that exceedingly difficult to believe that that would be better than someone who knows how to refract and do a proper manifest refraction. Because what is manifest refraction? Well, it's the anterior cornea, the posterior cornea, the lens, but also, by the way, the retina could have a cylindrical shape, and therefore there could be cylinder that has to be compensated in lenses for a cylindrical retina. That's possible too. But then there's also the last component, which is the brain. And that's why manifest refraction and wavefront refraction of the eye will never be exactly the same. Because while an objective device that can measure the refraction of an eye perfectly is only measuring the refraction of the eye, the brain component is still one that alters what the patient asks for in the refraction. And the reason why I never did, I did a few, but I stopped, because I saw this paper by Pablo Artal in the Journal of Vision, where he showed that internal aberrations, when added to corneal aberrations, reduced the aberrations of the whole eye. And what that means is that if you remove the corneal aberrations, the whole eye will be worse because you're removing the compensation. So again, why a company can use marketing to convince everybody that will not look at this critically that it's better to do corneal wavefront treatment for everyone. Again, it's the same marketing technology used to pull the wool over surgeons' eyes to gain market share. It's not honest. Okay, the big problem with topography guided treatments is the ocular residual astigmatism. Because if you have corneal astigmatism that's different from the refraction, which one are you going to treat? If you're doing a corneal wavefront guided treatment, you're treating the corneal astigmatism. But if the manifest refraction has a different refraction, a totally different axis, you have a high intraocular astigmatism, what are you going to treat? And it's very interesting to see that in the literature, there are just as many papers saying that the topography modified results are better. There are those that show that manifest is better. And then there's one that shows that there's no difference. So actually the score is 0. The score is it's not better. You don't have 5 papers showing that it's better. Even if you take the average of biased studies, you've got the same number in both directions. So we come down to the brain. And so I'm going to just quickly go through ocular residual astigmatism. So if you have a manifest refraction and you have a corneal astigmatism that's similar, then the vector between the two is very small, and you can treat the corneal astigmatism and you'll get a pretty good result. But you can have eyes, here's one, where the corneal astigmatism is very different from the manifest refraction. And what do you do in this case? Now the vector between the two is very different. And what Noel Alpens has talked about is to treat between the two, which means you leave astigmatism in the refraction and you leave astigmatism in the cornea. And he kind of thinks that this is going to give you better results. But I don't believe it, and there still isn't a paper that's shown this, other than one that we published with Tim Archer as first author, who showed that it only works if the ocular residual astigmatism is very high. But anyway, we can sidetrack on that. Could be a whole other lecture. So the point is, vector planning, which is going between the two, is bonkers, because you're not really doing good to anyone. And I can explain why Noel believed, and Noel invented astigmatism research and reporting, and I am a total disciple of his method, but I don't agree with vector planning. And I know that Four Cities is out there helping people do this, but I don't think it gives you better results than if you use really accurate manifest refraction. I've got examples of this, but we lost so much time that it'd probably be better if we skip this. An eye that had 0.5 diopters of astigmatism on the back surface, but had high corneal astigmatism that wasn't in the manifest refraction. So it's an interesting case because it is an ORA case. But anyway, there's only 3 reasons for having a high intraocular astigmatism. Either you didn't refract correctly, so when you see a high ORA, go back and refract the patient again. Or the topography was not a good exam, and so the Ks are not real. If you have a symmetric cornea, then the Ks, which is the average of the 3 millimeter zone, they're not real. It's an average. So the Ks can be wrong, and therefore you get an abnormal ORA because the Ks are wrong. And then the third way is actually you really do have a high ORA. And you know who has really high ORA? Cataract patients that have had a toric lens put into them. They have a really high ORA. Okay? Okay, so let's move on to where topography-guided Contura, Tosca, where these treatments really work. They work in patients who are complaining of their higher order aberrations. So this patient came in, -3 no cylinder, 2016 best corrected, complaining that he wants laser eye surgery because with his glasses, he has ghosting down and to the left in his right eye. Very specific. So we look at this topography and we see this. Now, Contura were saying you should do a topography-guided treatment. I agree. But what I don't agree is that they were saying you should do it without telling people to look at an epithelial map first. So they were trying to get everyone to do topography-guided treatments, but they weren't saying, but please don't do it unless you've looked at an epithelial map. Because as you know, so many people have inferior coma that's just because the epithelium is thicker. But a lot of people will have inferior steepening because it's keratoconus. So getting the testing done and showing that the epithelium is thick where there is inferior steepening, that is the gate that you can go through to do a topography-guided treatment in someone with inferior steepening. Otherwise, you can't. Because as you can see, and we know, the pentagram back surface analysis is not as sensitive at picking up keratoconus as epithelial maps. So epithelial map is the gate for any inferior steepening treatment. And if you're doing inferior steepening treatments without epithelial maps, you're rolling the dice. This is the result. The patient had an excellent outcome. The topography changed as planned. This is 6 years, plano, perfect, no ghosting, super happy. Ablation profile slightly decentered to take care of that. This is an example where you do use topography-guided treatments. Patient gets better contrast, everyone's happy. This is another example where someone had a change in topography that was like this, or we thought it was maybe angle kappa related. 20/30 best corrected. Oh, maybe the 20/30 best corrected is because of the coma, this Olympic coma in the eye. We corrected the coma, 6 years post-op, totally plano, coma is better, vision didn't improve. But, okay, maybe the contrast went up a little bit, I think. But anyway, what I'm showing you here is that usually people are 20/20 or 20/16 because of their retina, not because of the higher order aberrations. Okay? So again, marketing deceptively. And it's, I gotta control myself here because I get very upset about this stuff. Okay, his contrast maybe went up a little bit, but one patch difference. So we've told you, so at the beginning of this lecture, we talked about the purpose of today. The purpose of today is to talk about customized treatments. And my purpose is to explain why higher order aberration customization in normal eyes is not honest, because it doesn't give the patient more. You can charge them more by telling them that it's better, but it's not. And until we have studies that have, unlike the Wavelight publication where they showed 90% the 2016 pre-op and 80% post-op, you can get those results with SMILE with no customization, okay? Now, let's go to SMILE, because this is where I'm going to explain to you why we have topography guided, we have trans-PRK, we have everything in my clinic. But the thing is, we don't charge different for different surgeries. So we don't have an incentive to charge more for a topography guided customized treatment than a SMILE. We will pick what's better for the patient independent of cost. Now, we charge a lot, but at least it's the same. So the patient doesn't have to decide if they pay more to have better vision or pay less to have less good vision. That's like an ethical question. I'm not sure that's even ethical, but I know it happens around the world. So SMILE. The science of SMILE is that it does preserve the mechanics better, but that's not the reason why SMILE is better. You can use larger optical zones, which induce less spherical aberration. You are preserving the nerves and get less dry eye, and the outcomes are superb. So, corneal strength, we've shown that the cornea remains stronger after SMILE. It's been shown by many in many publications, and we published a paper where we showed that the relative change in the tensile strength of the eye is obviously less with SMILE. That's fine. We have 28% less tensile strength reduction with SMILE. But here's the thing, we can use larger optical zones with SMILE because we are affecting the mechanics less. And therefore, when you're using larger optical zones, this is myopia correction, change in spherical aberration. So if you do a 6 millimeter zone SMILE, you induce this kind of spherical aberration. If you do a 6.5 millimeter SMILE, you induce less. And if you do a 7 millimeter SMILE, you induce even less. Now let's go back to comparing this to wavefront guided. Well, Vuzix call it wavefront guided. Wavelight call it wavefront optimized. Zeiss calls it AAA or ASA. If you use that profile, same 6 millimeter zone, you induce the same amount of spherical aberration. So a 6 millimeter SMILE with no optimization induces the same spherical aberration as a wavefront optimized treatment. But the SMILE takes less tissue in a 6 millimeter zone than a LASIK with wavefront optimization. So if you compare 6.5 millimeter SMILE with 6 millimeter wavefront optimized, you take the same amount of tissue, but you induce less spherical aberration than with LASIK. And obviously, with a 7 millimeter zone, you do take more tissue with SMILE than a 6 millimeter wavefront optimized, but you're still leaving the cornea stronger despite taking more tissue out. So that's the story. Spherical aberration is the most important aberration. Somebody asking a question, or they need to be muted? Okay, let me go here. Okay, so right now, if we look at the comparison between spherical aberration induction between LASIK and SMILE, obviously we induce much less spherical aberration with SMILE. And this is the great advantage of SMILE. This is why 83% of the treatments that we do at London Vision Clinic are SMILE, because we're inducing less spherical aberration. By the way, the problem with inducing less spherical aberration is that you can't do SMILE monovision and have it work as well as Presbyond. So Presbyond is LASIK. It works better than SMILE monovision because SMILE does not induce spherical aberration. But we can talk about that another time. It's been shown worldwide that SMILE introduces less aberrations in LASIK. We know that the nerves are more preserved. This has been shown. Nobody's arguing about this anymore. In fact, It's you know, confocal microscopy from Mario Nubile, very, very nice, showing the cut nerves down here, but not in the cap. Yeah. And when we look at the outcomes analysis, this is our paper of 4,000 eyes, we see incredible results. 95% 20/20. Unbelievable. This is 4,000 eyes, yeah? And super accurate. So this is compared to their glasses. So this takes away the fudging of what percentage were 2016 before surgery, because it's comparing it to what they could see before with glasses. So 96% are within one line of their glasses before surgery. And there was no loss of two lines. Essentially, there were three eyes, but all three of them were fixed. And they happened for different reasons, and we talk about this in our SMILE course. Very good predictability. As you can see, our nomogram is beautifully set, and the 88% within a half, and super stability. Cylinder correction is also very well controlled. We have an excellent nomogram, and you know, there's no systematic cyclotorsional problem. Contrast sensitivity is maintained. In fact, not just maintained, it's slightly increased. Why? Because when you're measuring contrast before surgery, you're measuring through a phoropter, and when you're measuring afterwards, you're measuring with hardly any lenses in front, so the contrast goes up. But it's not because the contrast went up, it's because, you know, they see better without glasses. So SMILE is a super mature procedure. With everything's been worked out: cyclotorsion, the instrumentation, the standard removal of lenticule, energy control, energy patterns, how to remove lenticules that are stuck, that are torn, different complications that are different from LASIK, how to do enhancements. It's a completely mature procedure. There have been close to 13 million procedures already performed around the world. And because it induces less spherical aberration, it's better than LASIK. Okay? Unless you want to induce spherical aberration. And again, that is to do with understanding the benefits of spherical aberration and how that works. Yeah. Now, we'll finish with just ICL, because obviously that doesn't change the corneal aberrations. It's very good for high prescriptions. You know, we have patients up to -20, and we have 93% 20/20. I mean, it's an incredible technology. What is not incredible about it is that the company, I mean, the accuracy is ridiculous. Why? Because it's a piece of plastic, right? It's silicone. So obviously, if you're good at refracting, you're going to be very good at results with ICL. The problem is sizing. And, you know, we worked on this. ICLsizing.com is the website where we use the posterior chamber dimensions. And I'll just jump to the results, because if we look at the results of the ICLsizing.com, let's call it the REINSTEIN equation, and this is the post-op results of the whole population, and we compare it to other formulas like the sulcus to sulcus formulas, the Kojima formula, the Nakamura 2, the Iragashi, the STAR, obviously the white to white. The best is measuring behind the iris and measuring the ciliary body inner diameter. That's the way of guaranteeing as best as you can that the size of the IOL, but of the ICL, would be best. And when you look here, we had, when we're comparing high-frequency ultrasound ciliary body inner diameter multivariate formula with all of the other equations, you see that we have 61% within 100 microns of intended, and it's really, you know, quite extraordinary compared to 18% with the STAR formula. And the OCT formulas are good, but nowhere near as good as going behind the iris. So, I think I've taken you through the story. I don't know how long this took because we had a lot of technical problems, but essentially we've gone through the fact that customization with higher order aberrations in normal virgin eyes is practically unnecessary. I've shown you that there are eyes where they can benefit from it. I'm not saying we don't use it. I'm saying it is wrong to say that it's better to use it for all virgin eyes. I've also shown you that the induction of spherical aberration is far lower with SMILE than it is with any LASIK. And therefore, if what you're worried about in a virgin eye is spherical aberration, then why are you doing a LASIK custom treatment? Because you're going to induce more spherical aberration. And you're certainly going to drown the tiny little higher order aberrations out with your spherical aberration induction. So the logic of what's being sold now, I'm sorry, but the marketing message is way too, it's an overreach on the truth. And I would love to debate this with anybody who believes that I'm wrong, because I always like to be corrected if I'm wrong. So wavefront topography guided, customization. Customization is picking the right procedure for the patient. Now, at London Vision Clinic, you go on our website, so I can't hide it. Someone comes in with a -7, we charge them, I don't even know what we charge them, 7,500 pounds. Convert that into Vietnamese money. It's a lot. And we charge them the same whether they're going to have PRK, we don't do trans-PRK, PRK, LASIK, or SMILE. We charge them the same. We don't want the patient to think that we're going to do something better for them if they pay more. We want them to think we're going to do the best for them. End of discussion. We're going to pick the best procedure for them. Now, if we were interested in profit only, we would just do PRK on everyone, because then we don't have to pay for a flap or a contact glass or anything. But we do 1% PRK in our clinic. 1%. Because LASIK with a thin flap is the same mechanics as PRK, and because SMILE leaves the cornea stronger and induces less spherical aberration, so 80% of our treatments are SMILE. But we still do LASIK because there are cases where LASIK is better. I mean, mixed cylinder, you know, a -0.5, -0.75, super sportsman who needs to be great. You can't do SMILE. Well, you can, but you shouldn't do SMILE on those. So we still do a lot of LASIK, and we love LASIK. And of course, all of our presbyopia in the absence of cataract is done with Presbyon. And we obviously do cataract surgery, but we don't take out clear lenses when the cornea can have LASIK. So I hope that gives you a good picture of what I was trying to talk about here. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if some of you want to switch on your cameras and microphones and talk and ask questions.
Thank you very much, Professor REINSTEIN, for very, very useful and with many information from your lecture. And I think that it made me, and I think some of our colleagues change also about our concept. So we can see what you talk about the epithelium, about the operation, about SMILE, and about customizations. And thank you so much for that. And
Well,
let me speak in Vietnamese. Tôi nghĩ là giáo sư đã cho chúng ta một cái bài giảng hết sức là thú vị và cũng hết sức là nhiều thông tin. Và thậm chí là có những cái thông tin làm chúng ta cũng thay đổi cái cách nghĩ mà hàng ngày chúng ta vẫn có thể nghĩ và có thể ứng dụng được vào ở trong lâm sàng. Bây giờ thì giáo sư mặc dù là chúng ta trục trặc ở cái giai đoạn đầu, nhưng giáo sư vẫn có thể dành thời gian để cho chúng ta có thể thảo luận hoặc là có một số các câu hỏi. Thì cũng xin mời bác sĩ Phan Hồng Mai cũng như là các anh các chị ở trong hiện nay đang ở trong cái diễn đàn này có thể đặt những câu hỏi hoặc là có những cái chia sẻ thêm với lại giáo sư REINSTEIN. Và xin mời các anh các chị ạ.
Em xin
Thank you, Dr. Darrenstein, for your lecture. And I think our doctor now understand that the custom treatment is not necessary for almost patients. And the important thing we need to give patients must be a real benefit, like a Presbyon or SMILE. So I have a question for you. The first one is, what surgery do you suggest for residual refractive error when the patient have a cataract surgery, especially for multifocal lens?
Right. So multifocal lenses do not function well if there's a refractive error. We know that. They're designed that way. And so, honestly, it's getting rid of the refractive error is the method. Because these lenses do not have significant higher order aberrations, if you have a virgin cornea, then I would literally just treat not customized. Don't mess anything up. Just do the sphere and cylinder. They're very low corrections anyway. So the accuracy will be very high if you don't mess around with anything else. So we will use spectacles trials to ask them if their night vision is satisfactory with the residual refraction. So we won't do the treatment unless we've made a pair of spectacles and had them go outside at night and check if this fixes the problem. Because if the spectacles don't fix the problem, it's the multifocal. So we use standard profiles for that. Standard profiles. If someone has a monofocal IOL and they are still in spectacles after cataract surgery, we do presbyond. So, in fact, we have a professor from Thailand who came to our course, and he was 74, and he had bilateral monofocal IOLs, and we did presbyond on him, and he was completely spectacle-free, and still is, my understanding. So, presbyond is great as a profile if you're pseudophakic with a monofocal, but if you have a multifocal, your best chance is to correct the refractive error, and don't do that with anything fancy, because if you do, you're reducing the chances of hitting the target. But you need to test in advance whether it's worth doing that, because sometimes you'll just say, oh, well, we'll just correct the 0.75 ceiling, you'll be happy. But it turns out then, that now the patient starts to lose confidence because you told them it would work and it didn't. So it's a tricky scenario. Lens exchange is, obviously a much higher risk surgery than anything else. The other thing that I sometimes will be able to do is some monovision in someone who has bilateral perfect cataract surgery, YAG has been done, no refractive error. They don't have enough reading. It just happens, right? Some brains don't do it. And so we will test them for a small amount of monovision, and we will give them that.
Thank you. Xin mời bác sĩ Hậu, hồi nãy thấy Định có đặt câu hỏi cho Dr. REINSTEIN.
Dạ,
So
chào cô Mai và chào mọi người ạ. Thì em muốn hỏi Dr. REINSTEIN thì em được biết là bác sĩ REINSTEIN là một trong những người trong đội ngũ sáng chế ra phương pháp presbyond. Thì em muốn hỏi về cái việc cơ chế tạo cầu sai trên giác mạc của phương pháp này. Thì đối với những cái kính IDOP trong phẫu thuật nội nhãn thì đa số cái việc tạo cầu sai này chỉ giúp cho bệnh nhân nhìn được về phía cận thôi, là về phía trừ thôi. Nhưng mà đối với cái phương pháp presbyond này thì có thể là mở rộng ra vùng nhìn cả về cận và về viễn. Thì em muốn hỏi cơ chế là cái việc tạo cầu sai nó có sự khác biệt gì so với những cái kính IDOP mà giúp cho bệnh nhân có thể nhìn về cả phía cận và cả phía viễn trên cái phương pháp presbyond này ạ? Đó là câu hỏi của em ạ.
yeah.
So,
Xin
Dr. Hậu
mời.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. So, Dr. Hậu from the audience has a question for you regarding the mechanism of creating a spherical aberration of the cornea, and because it is more effective than an EDOF. So, if you can clarify more on that.
Cho em hỏi ông không?
Something added there?
So I just want to ask you about the presbyond and the EDOP lens,
Yeah.
because I know you in the development team to create the presbyond procedure, but I very want to know about the geography of the cornea in the presbyond, because with the EDOP lens like VVT or in hand or something like that, or look smart, the people just can see from the target to the minus. But in presbyond, we can the patient after presbyond can see the from the target to the minus and plus. Like for the example, if I target the presbyond to the 0.5 minus, the patient can see from plano to minus 1.25, something like that. But with the EDOP lens like VVT or something like that, if I target the patients from -1, the patient just see from -1 to -2, and I don't know why the differences of the spherical aberration between the EDOP lens and the presbyond. So yes, that's
Right.
my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. let me see if I can pull up some slides here to illustrate this. Okay, so here we go. Presbyopia and multifocality. Well, I can't talk and do this at the same time. First of all, what I can say with my eyes closed while I'm doing this is that the Vivity in my classification of EDOF lenses is different from the industry one. For me, the Vivity is a pseudo EDOF lens. It's not an EDOF lens because what it's doing is it has 3 refractive zones. It's a multifocal refractive lens. It has 3 zones that are kind of squashed together. And so it gives you the effect of a EDOF, but it isn't actually EDOF. EDOF, in my definition, is more like the IHANTS or the EMV. These are lenses that have spherical aberration in them, and they increase depth of field that way. So I found the slides here actually while we're talking here. Let me see if I can do this. I'll share this here. There. Okay. So here we go. So here's a patient who had a Vivity lens, and his refraction was +1/4, -1/4, and plano -1/4. He had, and the cataract surgery was done exquisitely, and there was his OSI was 0.2. He had no capsular opacification, but his complaint on his QOV, he was incredibly dissatisfied. Incredibly dissatisfied. He said that the quality of his vision was ruined, and so when we analyzed this guy, we found that his pupils were not too small, although they in room lights they got down to 3.7, but mesopic 4 and 5. But when we did the super high resolution wavefront sensor, and there's only one of these devices in the world, and if you are thinking about upgrading your wavefront sensor, nothing comes close to the Osiris from CSO. It has, instead of like 1,200 lenslets in a 6mm whatever zone, it's 40,000. It's another planet. So this means that you can see the optics of this Vivity. Now, look at this. Okay, this is the refractive error. So this is a ring of high power here, another power out here, and another power out here. So it's a multifocal refractive lens. It's refractive, right? It's not diffractive. And so multiple foci, I don't consider that to be EDOF, and the results also don't show that, because as you very much said, this is what's so strange. They say that 95% of these eyes were within a half diopter. But only, if 95% are within a half, how come only 50% are 20/20? All right, so again, a lot of discrepancies here. And the Galaxy is another very interesting lens because it comes into this, because they achieved only 61% 20/20. Okay, and that's not great. They had, this is in cataract patients, they had patients losing lines from before surgery. In other words, so-called cataract patient has this lens put in and ends up with 3 or more lines of loss of best spectacle corrected vision. 2% of the patients, of the eyes. So we don't understand the optics of this. No one's transparent about the optics of this. No one tells us what the optics are. Damien has a whole website trying to model what spiral optics really are. It's not clear, but it's definitely not EDOF, and it's not simultaneous 3-bit. We don't know what it is. But when you look at the Osiris of this lens, are you getting a little bit of deja vu right now? It looks like a Vividi. The same thing. So anyway, whatever. So to answer your question, the reason why PresBeyond works better than IOLs there's several reasons. The first one is PresBeyond is LASIK, and LASIK is more accurate. So the chances of having an exact refraction is higher with PresBeyond than with any IOL. Even the light adjustable, and without 7 visits post-op. The second reason is that the spherical aberration is not induced necessarily, it's modulated, right? Because the treatment of the ametropia produces an induction to spherical aberration. And what the software does is it takes the pre-op spherical aberration, the amount of error to be corrected, the age of the patient, the age factor, and it says with this, if you just do a straight correction of this refractive error, you're going to induce this much. Oops, that's too much. So it puts in anti-spherical aberration into the profile, so it puts it into the therapeutic range. So in a way, PresBeyond is a much more customized procedure than a multifocal IOL. Because multifocal IOL is one optic inside the eye, that's it, you take it or leave it. Whereas PresBeyond customizes it inside the software for you. So there can be, many, well, the third reason is that we're using the microanisotropia, right? And so we are taking advantage of the fact that if you set the non-dominant eye to -150, even though it's -150, it still sees. I'm -175. I pointed at my distance eye. It's actually this eye. I don't even know which eye is which. My non-dominant eye is -175. My distance vision in that eye is 20/50 -2. You don't. I mean, it's no wonder I have no cross blur, and it's no wonder that I have 40 seconds of near uncorrected stereo. It's because the vision in my near eye is so damn good that it contributes to my stereo acuity. So I'm glad you asked the question, because it took 25 years for the lens industry to copy PresBeyond, right? PresBeyond is the original EDOF. It took 25 years to copy it, but you still have the disadvantages of an intraocular procedure, which is much more risk, the less accuracy because of IOL calculations, never going to reach LASIK, the adjustable lens, 7 visits minimum, and it doesn't even get the target all the time. It's like intraocular surgery for someone who doesn't have a cataract. I'm sorry, Robert Lin here from Los Angeles. He's from Taiwan, but Taiwanese family, but he chose to live in the States, which I don't understand, because he could be doing PresBeyond and all of these sophisticated treatments, but he's locked himself into Southern California. He's one of the best surgeons in the U.S. with his hands tied by FDA technology. All right. I mean, your smile, you do ICLs with high frequency ultrasound sizing, you do monovision. He runs a phenomenal practice. But the point being here that the world has access to a treatment that is less risk, more accurate, less side effects, adjustable, reversible, and yet people are still saying, "Oh yeah, but the EDOF lens, and I just do cataract surgery." So I don't know. Thank you for your question, and I went off on a tangent because I can't help it.
I think we should do just a monofocal and then the PresBeyond.
Well, I mean, we do that in some patients. I tell you who I do that for. I did it for, and he is now passed away, but he allowed me to tell my conferences and my teaching that I did his size. There's a musician called Chick Corea. Chick Corea is, I mean, I don't know who's the most famous pop musician in Vietnam. You don't know.
I don't know.
You're too old. Okay. I mean, has everybody heard of Ed Sheeran? Everybody heard of Ed Sheeran? Yeah? Okay. Chick Corea is the Ed Sheeran of jazz. Okay? He came into me with 20/50 cataracts and said, I want your laser procedure. I said, I can't do it because you have cataract. He goes, it's okay. No. I can only do as well as your glasses do, but you need, the windows are dirty. We need to clean the windows. And he said, but I'm fine. I drive at night, no problem. I go, what? You're not legal to drive right now. Your vision's below driving standard, even with glasses. So I sent him back to Florida. Florida has a lot of great cataract surgeons. And I instructed the cataract surgeon to leave him plus 225 in his dominant eye, plus 125 in his non-dominant eye. That was the instructions with a monofocal IOL, which he did. He did a YAG. He came back to me. I did presbyond. 100% independent of glasses in all lighting conditions, which means in a theater with a spotlight on you, trying to read music at, piano score distance, which is like 70 centimeters, reading a book, driving at night, 100% independent from glasses. In someone who needs all of these different distances, we will tell them that we will do premium cataract surgery, no really premium, which is cataract surgery with a monofocal IOL targeting a small amount of hyperopia, and then presbyond on top.
But you can explain more about the spherical aberration, because as the people knows that if you have the positive spherical aberration, positive SA, I will call SA for the spherical aberration. If you have the positive SA, the peripheral light will focus in front of the central. But if we have the negative SA, the peripheral will focus behind the central. So this is, but presbyond will do in the both of that way, because the patient, no.
So I'm glad you brought this up. You're obviously very adept with optics, more than most surgeons, and you understand that, and that's great. But here's the eternal debate that we keep on having with, well, like I have had big debates here with Gatinel about this, because he says exactly what you're saying, and you're absolutely, you are correct from a ray trace standpoint. Okay, so what you've said is completely correct from a ray tracing standpoint. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show a slide. If I can get this shared. This is a paper published by Carolina Rocha when she was a fellow at Cleveland Clinic, and they had a adaptive optics aberrometer. So what that means is the aberrometer, you can take a normal person, and without doing surgery, you can put spherical aberration into the visual pathway, and they measure the depth of field. So here is the spherical aberration, and as you know, when you induce negative spherical aberration, that means that when the pupil gets smaller, the eye gets more myopic, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can see, as the spherical aberration was increased, they got more depth of field. So you would say it's because there's more central myopia. But what happened was that they saw what we had described, what was this, 2009. We described this in 2005 in the JRS, the spherical aberration tolerances. And what we discovered, and we went to her paper and we said, this is a beautiful paper because you're showing that positive spherical aberration, despite the logic of ray tracing that you have just explained, that if the pupil gets smaller, you'll become more hyperopic. Despite that, we get an increase in depth of field. And the increase in depth of field was the same whether you had positive or negative spherical aberration. put into the visual pathway. And it mirrored exactly what we showed in our 2005 paper in GRS, that if you go above a certain threshold, and we said it was 0.6, and this is exactly what they found. Above 0.6, you don't get any more benefit, and in fact, you can even get a decrease or a loss of contrast or halos or symptomatic visual problems. So your question is perfect because it addresses the reason why Wavelight used to have the Q slider and say, put it on -0.6 and do the surgery, but they cut the ability to do it with myopia and only admit it now with hyperopia. Why? Because with hyperopia, you're inducing negative spherical aberration and it's a smooth profile. But with myopia, if you go above -4 or -5, if you flatten the cornea in the middle, but you need the center to be steeper for a negative Q, you have to make a central island. The central island is a bifocal cornea. That's what Schwind have been battling with for years with their Presbymax. That's what Supracore have been battling with for years with their Presbymax and Supracore. And Supracore you can have mild, medium, strong, and Presbymax you can have, you know, binocular, hybrid, you know, and now they're saying do it monocularly. I mean, if that's not an admission that multifocality on the cornea is bad, what is? They're saying don't do it in both eyes. So again, I'm just, you know, trying to point out here, it's kind of the theme of this whole session has been trying to look at marketing in a critical way, not allowing, I don't want to allow companies to market pseudoscience and pull the wool over my colleagues' eyes and the patients, because unfortunately the patients read the internet and they see these claims that the Wavelight Plus is going to give them a better chance of, you know, 2010 or something, and this is not true. I mean, it's true for some eyes, but it's not true for the general population. But they want everyone to use it because they have a, I guess they're charging more for that particular procedure. So it's all part of business, you know. That's why I'm going to say again, for those of you who weren't here earlier, we charge the same for every single refractive surgical procedure. PRK, LASIK, SMILE, custom cornea, topography guided, wavefront guided, we SMILE, we charge the same. SMILE, SMILE Pro, we charge the same for everything. Because, and we charge a lot, but we charge the same. We don't want the patient to think, well, maybe I'll pay less and get less good vision, it's good enough for me. We don't want the patient to have an option to have less good vision than we could give them. That's been our marketing. And I think that if the whole world thought this way, and we stopped discounting refractive surgery, which is actually a highly complex procedure, there would be much more confidence in refractive surgery. We would get the opposite effect of discount. Discounting is to get more volume, but it has the opposite effect. It lowers confidence. It means, well, why are they doing it for less and those guys are doing it for more? You know what? I don't understand. The guys are doing it for less, say they have the latest technology. And oh, wait, it's the same laser. Oh, well, I don't understand this thing, so I'm not going to do it. I think there's a lot of skepticism that is leading to us only having 1% market penetrance because of this, because of deceptive marketing techniques that are being used, not just by industry, but mainly by industry, but also by our colleagues, you know.
Thank you. And until now, Presbyon is still Fento LASIK. So do you think the Presbyon Smile will be successful?
I don't think it's going to be successful. I know it's going to be successful. I wouldn't have, 2 years ago, I couldn't answer the question. But we've just finished the first part of the trial at our clinic in London. Obviously, by the way, somebody earlier said that, I think you said that that I'm part of the development of Presbyon. Just for the record, with Tim Archer 20 years ago, we developed Presbyon at London Vision Clinic. We were not asked to do it by Zeiss. We did it because we didn't want to put array, restore, resume lenses in. We just didn't want to do that. And monovision worked okay, but it wasn't great. So we wanted something better than monovision. And so we found something that made monovision better. In fact, it made it so much better, it wasn't mono anymore, it was binocular. So Presbyond is a binocular modified treatment, not a monovision or micromonovision, the way we had originally called it. Anyway, what's your question? Sorry, I completely forgot. I guess I'm sidetracked here. Well, your question was about, oh, Presbyond Smile. Yeah. So I mentioned this earlier. The advantage of Smile over Waylight Plus or anything else on the LASIK or PRK is that it induces less spherical aberration. I mean, way less. Not a little bit less, a lot less. And so it is better optics for myopic correction. The problem with trying to develop Presbyond Smile is that it doesn't induce a lot of spherical aberration. That's the problem. So we have this challenge now. The challenge that we have is, how do you do Smile inducing spherical aberration? And I've got to tell you, it wasn't easy. It took us about a year to modify the profiles actually in different ways, which we didn't expect. In fact, we have new patents because some things we observed that we couldn't understand. And then when we understood it, and there was something else that happened that we were like, wow, no one's even thought about this before. So we've got like new patents that came out of developing this, which are nothing to do with Presbyond. They're to do with lenticular extraction improvements. But what we have now is a matrix of eyes treated at different prescriptions with different pre-op spherical aberrations. We have the refractive results. We have the multivariate regression analysis to get the refraction target accurate. And now we're about to start, we hope to start the multi-center trial with the actual software. If you are interested in this, I would suggest that you all send an email to Michael Achterlig, who is deciding on the budget, and he decides when we start the trial. And last I was told, there isn't budget right now. So, you know, there's 120 people online here. 120 emails going to Michael, please, tomorrow.
Thank you.
But oh, when will it be available? Approximately 7 to 10 years from now.
Oh, okay. Mình còn câu hỏi nào nữa không ạ?
There's a question in the chat box, if you please.
Oh, okay. Would you please share your criteria for deciding whether patients require customized LASIK, wavefront guided or TOGA? Do we need specialized imaging for aberration evaluation, Chuyên MS39, or Pentacam is good enough? No, Pentacam is not good enough. Forget it. It's 20-year-old technology. If you have a Pentacam wave, I guess you have a wavefront sensor in there. But the Pentacam alone is really, really old technology. And it also produces a lot of false negatives on the Bell and Ambrosio for excluding patients because they have borderline keratoconus. So the only reason we use the Pentacam still is in conjunction with the Corvis to get the CBI and TBI. That's the only way that we use our Pentacam now. If you want to do the best decision matrix, and it looks to me like you have a Schwind because you called it a Schwind. You called it a Schwind MS39, but it's not a Schwind MS39. It's a CSO MS39 that is being used by Schwind. Okay, hold on. Yeah. So, yes, you have to have all of the diagnostics to be able to decide what's better for a patient. So every single patient that comes to us gets MS39, Osiris. On the MS39, we do the dynamic pupillometry. We do the tear film breakup time. We get the axial length. The Osiris, we do undilated, and then we do it dilated because you need the 6 millimeter zone. We refract the patient according to our standard protocol, which is 9 people refracting exactly the same way. The inter-observer difference is 0.19 diopters. We've published that. And we look at the best spectacle corrected. We measure contrast in every single patient. It doesn't matter if they're young, we still measure contrast. And you know, here's why it's important. You can have a 23-year-old -7 with a 570 cornea that is not keratoconic, and they are a candidate for LASIK. And you can have another one who isn't. What's the difference between those two? The difference is one of them has low contrast already and has very high spherical aberration already. Their lens is fat and they've got a lot of spherical aberration. You do the same treatment in both patients, this one will not be happy with their night vision and this one will. So yes, it's a good question. All diagnostics are necessary to make the right decision for each eye. But I will go back to this again. Wavefront, you know, you talk about customized LASIK. I talk about customized treatment. Because if I choose SMILE, that's a customized decision. That's not because SMILE doesn't have higher order aberrations inside that it's not custom. Of course it's custom. I chose it. I chose it to induce less spherical aberration, have less dry eye, faster recovery. I chose it. I customized it. That's why I didn't do LASIK on that patient. But if someone has inferior steepening and it's not keratoconic because I did an epithelial map and they're everything, yeah, well, then I'll do a topography guided treatment. Do you see? We have to get away from marketing wavefront guided, topography guided as a thing, because the patients think it's better because they don't understand it. And it's disingenuous because in 98% or 97% of patients, the higher order aberrations inside the treatment don't help the patient more. So charging them more for that is not exactly fair. Yeah. So that's my, I hope that answers your question. What are the early results of Presbyon SMILE? Is it better? No, it's not better than Presbyon now. It's very early. Okay, we've been developing it for about 18 months. And so we started 10 years ago, but it stopped because of a million reasons. But it restarted 18 months ago, and now we are on track. So far, it's not as good, but I believe that 7 years from now, when it gets approved, or 10 years from now, when it gets approved, it will be the same. I don't think it will be. I don't think it will be better. It'll be the same with less dry eye. That's all. I mentioned a patient who had cataract surgery then Presbyon. Do you think any chance we can get a similar result with an EDOF in just one surgery? Well, that's what I was saying. The answer is no. You can't get the same result with one EDOF because EDOFs are still primitive. They still don't have the right amount of spherical aberration. They're still not putting enough in. There's a lens called the ART IOL, which was developed by Pablo Artal. He's putting in 3 times the amount of spherical aberration at the eye as we're using them at the London Vision Clinic. The industry is moving very slow in this regard. And let me remind you that the lenses that you were using in the 1990s were spherical. So they had spherical aberration. And those of you who are old enough, like me, to remember that there were patients who were plano post-op and could read the newspaper after cataract surgery, it's because the lenses were spherical. So the industry has taken us to aspherics, diffractive, multifocal, back to EDOF, and they're charging 10 times more for that spherical lens than they were 30 years ago. Again, I'm just telling the truth. So no, the answer is there's another very important reason why EDOF lenses at the moment can never achieve the same results as corneal spherical aberration, and that's because of centration. When you're putting a lens inside the eye, there's an angle alpha problem, and that angle alpha can make spherical aberration into coma. The perfect example of this was the star Viva lens, the one that was supposed to correct presbyopia. And you look at their outcomes, you know, you saw me tell you how great the star lens is, right? We have up to -20 with, you know, 100%, like 92% 20/20, right? But the Viva got 30% 20/20. Why? Because they chose spherical aberration, which I agree with, rather than diffractive optics. But they didn't consider angle alpha. They didn't consider that if you put the lens in the eye geometrically, if the eye is tilted, then the visual axis will not go through the center of that spherical aberration. And if you go through the center of the if you don't go through the center of the spherical aberration, you get coma. Interesting, huh?
There's still one more question in the chat box.
Oh, sorry. Is there results you mentioned? Okay, I have a question regarding the microanisotropia protocol for presbyon. How predictable is neutral adaptation among neural adaptation? Great. We have ESCRS this year. We are. Let me see if I can find it. Actually, we're so excited because we have been doing presbyon for so long now, and our practice, you know, grew tremendously thanks to presbyon, while everyone else around us was doing clear lens exchange. And we have been doing the +150 test and no contact lens monovision, well, hardly any contact lens monovision trials. Hardly any. And this +150 test, which I developed just out of necessity 20 years ago, because I realized that monovision testing with contact lenses rejected a lot of patients who would have been happy with presbyon. So we needed to develop a different way of testing. Here it is. So this is my ESCRS presentation for this year, submitted. Of course, now I'm going to show you the abstract. It'll probably get rejected. So, okay. So to determine the pass-fail rate of the presbyon +150 test, and to evaluate the incidence and age distribution of near-ad titration, and the quantity and frequency of nature of postoperative retreatments that modified the intended target. In other words, you do the +150 test, they don't adapt, you have to reduce the anisotropia. What's the chances of that happening? So what we found was that 1% of patients failed the +150 test. So it's very low. I used to say it was 4%, but I guess it's lower. And they were targeted for full distance in both eyes. Of the patients that passed, 13% were given less than the full blend, and 86% had the full +150. One thing that I will show in the talk is that most of these patients that had a mini blend, less blend, were in their 40s and they were myopes. So that's the group. The 40-year-olds myopes are the ones that tend to be the ones that take less than +150. Full distance targeting was largely confined to patients under 44, and it was less than 0.5% in older groups. Mini blend declined with age, as I said, and standard blend was predominant once the patients were 45. Amongst the presbyon treated patients, target modifying retreatments were uncommon. In other words, we did a reversal of dominance in 4 per 10,000, 1 in 2,500, a reduction of the ad only in 1.23 patients, and a conversion to full distance in 1 in 1,125 patients. So what this shows you is something very important, and that means that the presbyon +150 test is the best test we have for determining whether someone can have surgery on the cornea. And it's better than monovision testing because we know that 40% of people fail monovision testing. And that there are a lot of reasons for that. It doesn't have spherical aberration. They find the contact lens is uncomfortable. The cylinder isn't corrected in the contact lens, so the monovision test is not accurate. You know, so monovision testing is supposed to be the gold standard. I actually defended a surgeon here in the UK who did monovision cataracts, monovision LASIK in someone, and the patient sued them because he didn't do a contact lens trial, but he did the +150 test, and I was able to defend him by showing that contact lens monovision trials are less accurate, less chance of giving you the correct answer than the +150 test. Yeah, great questions, guys. I need to come to Vietnam here, and well, first I have to learn Vietnamese. That's going to take a little while.
Please come to Vietnam.
All right. Well,
one question for you. For your patients with the residual refractive errors after SMILE, which method will you have that? Where will you have?
Yeah. So our method of preference is LASIK on top of SMILE. And the reason why this is so brilliant is because we use a minimum of 130 micron flap. We use between 130 and 145. That's our standard flap. And a cap. And the reason why we do that is not just because it enables us to leave more nerves uncut. The deeper you go with the cap, the more nerves you are leaving uncut, right? And let me just show this slide. I'm just pulling up this slide here. Okay, right. So if I go here, okay. Oop, not that one. I think it's that one. No, sorry. Oh, here it is. Pardon me. Okay. Ah, there. Okay. Oh, silly. Okay. Right. There we go. So yeah. So I'll just skip to this. PRK is terrible after SMILE, by the way. Really terrible. So I can that we in our forefront refractive surgery course, which we've had a number of Vietnamese people come to. It's this year in May from the 7th to the 10th. We go through all of this in huge detail, but and you can take the course online. You don't have to come to London. So you can do a side cut inside the flap, but then you're restricted to the diameter of the flap. You can do a circle which converts a cap into a flap that's wider diameter, of course, but then you're using the whole thickness of the cap, which if you're doing the old-fashioned standard for SMILE, you're using 120. 120 is a really thick cap. It's a really thick flap. So what we do is we use, well, we have a circle calculator that we have to use in order to actually get the junctions at the right level. And we talk about all of this. You have to use this cap thickness mapping and put in the numbers and do all the errors. So, okay. So what we do, sorry, this is the cap thickness calculator, because the caps are not always parallel. And so you need to really calculate all of the different, the size of the different junctions and everything to actually get it to work. And it works and it's fine. But sometimes you get into the wrong interface. Yeah. So that's why we now have a cap calculator. For us, the best thing is to do another another flap. And the way you calculate this is very simple. If you obviously don't want to go into the epithelium, and you don't want to go into the original smile interface. We know that the epithelium really cannot go thicker than 80 microns. We know that because we've studied it for 30 years. I mean, you do a -10, it's not going to go more than 80 microns. If your cap is 119, then with the standard deviations of the actual femtosecond laser, which is 4.4 microns is one standard deviation, so 13 microns for 3 standard deviations, you can almost always make a 90 micron flap, not cross the epithelium and avoid the cap. So in the States, we're fixed to 120. Measure your epithelium to make sure it's not 85 or something weird, but you can almost always make a 90 micron flap on top of every smile. And then the patients have instant visual recovery the next morning and they love you again. Here's an example of a smile that was thinnest at 122 and thickest out here, the cap was 173. So caps can be quite deceivingly not parallel, even though they're cut parallel. And that's because the epithelium can be different profile and whatever. So we use the maximum epithelium, and we know that by measuring everything, we know that a 100 micron flap will be 38 microns clear of the epithelium and 22 microns clear of the smile interface. So that's how we do it. And the technique of lifting it, we go through this in great detail in the course, but it has to be done in a specific way. Otherwise, you have a very high chance of getting into the wrong interface. The video's going too slow here. I can't show it. But essentially, it's a bimanual technique to lift it. And the US, you have superior incision for the smile. It doesn't matter because your flap is not going to reach that thing. And if you open it, it doesn't matter. You just put it together. Bob's your uncle. Nothing happens. And we have the results of all of this. And the nomogram is interesting because the hyperopic enhancement nomogram that we use normally works. But the myopic enhancement that we used to use for LASIK doesn't work with SMILE. And I finally realized why. It was because of epithelial profiles. So for myopes, we put in the refraction directly into the MEL 90 on a AAA profile. But for hyperopes, we have to put in 2/3, right? Because you have to put in less because it's a consecutive hyperopia. So yeah, so for us, it's LASIK. We go over all this theory in the course, but that kind of basically answers your question. Maybe I could share here so that people can maybe want to do the course online. You're not allowed to. Can't send websites and sorry. Where's the chat? Chat. Oh, I see. There. So there you can see you can get you can take the forefront course online. It's 25 hours. It's a lot. You can come to London. We welcome you, of course. And we won't give you English food, as long as just to reassure you. We'll give you American food because we go bowling and we give you hamburgers. You can also take after you've taken the forefront course, you can take the therapeutic course, which is always in November. And each year we record the course professionally and put it online. So the latest online course is the latest course that we have. And every year the course evolves. Thanks to excellent questions like this, like we're getting here, and we then go back and make new slides that answer those questions. Like today, I was asked to talk about the importance of customization, and I was told that Wavelight Plus is all over the place, and Chuyên are selling corneal wavefront guided, and it's big. So I thought, okay, time to pull this lecture together and talk about the importance of customization, not the importance of wavefront guided. If you're talking about the whole family of treatments. Role of optometrists in our team? Yeah, optometrists are the most important component of presbyond in our clinic, because if your post-op refractions aren't accurate, your nomogram won't be good. If your pre-op refractions aren't accurate, your treatments won't work. In our protocol, we have 9 optometrists and we have three surgeons, and we have tested the relative accuracy of refraction between surgeons and optometrists, and we have an absolutely standardized process for refraction. And those of you who have attended our course have been, exposed to this. Refraction is the most critical component. It's way more important than wavefront. Way more important. People are worried about higher order aberrations, and then they don't refract accurately. It's like, it's crazy. It's like having an alarm system and not closing the door. So yeah, so basically our optometrists are critical. We spend a lot of time training them and making sure that our refractions are accurate. So we have the first visit is with the optometrist. They do a manifest, then a cyclo, then another manifest is done by the surgeon, because we look at the cyclo, and that's another one of our presentations this year at the ESCRS. We're showing how great our manifest refraction technique is for hyperopes under the age of 40 with more than +3 of hyperopia, with cyclo with only tropicamide, not cyclo, right? Not cyclopentolate. And we're showing just how incredibly accurate our protocol is for refraction compared to the cyclo, and how it's even more accurate when you do a manifest after the cyclo. So in terms of refraction, that's why the optometrists are so critical in the components of, if you have a practice that is co-managing with optometrists, it should be in-house. Using outside optometrists refractions is not a good way of doing refractive surgery. And some places they use auto refraction for refractive surgery, which is, I don't think I have to say anything. So I hope, does that answer your question? Do you have other questions? Optometrists are underrated in Vietnam. That's interesting. My optometrists, we have grand round. We used to have grand rounds every week for an hour and a half. Now we have it every 2 weeks. I have the same optometrist for the last 15 years. Some of them are 10, some of them are 8. Let me tell you something. My optometrists, I will challenge anybody here on this. My optometrists know more than the vast majority of refractive surgeons about refractive surgery. And that's because they're in-house and they're constantly taught, and they're constantly bringing questions, file reviews to us as to what we want to do, and we're constantly learning. So their level of knowledge is not inferior to that of surgeons in terms of pre-op and post-op assessment. So the optometrists are an incredibly valuable asset to any refractive surgery practice if you train them properly. Yeah, if optometrists are underrated in Vietnam, I would advise whoever's doing that to back off, because I mean, Robert, you must have lots of optometrists in the US, the US model, right?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
This is an amazing lecture, Professor Einstein. So a couple comments I have. Yes, we have a lot of optometrists, and the most important thing is to have the best refraction. And actually, I wanted to get more information about how we can always standardize our refraction. That's always been the biggest problem. So when we have a new optometrist, we have them come in and they start refracting our patients with a senior optometrist, and we refract the same patient to make sure they're getting the same. We do a lot of red-green balance and different things, but we're very interested in knowing your technique.
Yeah.
Second is, in the US, most people actually use wavefront optimize on the Allegretto system, like I'd say 80 to 90%. And the reason is because Contura, and I don't know about Wavelight Plus, a lot of times it's really hard to use because the numbers are different from the manifest refraction. The device will tell you to use a different number, and it's always some number between the refraction and the wavefront system telling you. And third, I could say that I know positive spherical aberration works very well on the cornea because I had LASIK in 1997. I'm 58. I have like a minus half in one eye, but I can see J1 plus, and my distance is amazing. And that eye is about 20/25, even though I see it's minus half and I see J1 plus with it. So positive aberration, spherical aberration is very helpful. And I had that because I had an old time laser from 29 years ago.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. These pearls are just amazing. And also, I'd like to know more about your plus 150 test, because
Right.
I do a lot of, we call it blended vision here.
Sure.
And I've done over 70,000, refractive procedures, and I gave a lot of monovision, blended vision. But we rarely also did very few contact lens trials, but we did do in-house trials. And now, honestly, with more multifocal lens, we're doing a lot less hyperopic LASIK. But I've operated on probably 1,000 manicurists, and most of them are actually Vietnamese because I'm in Los Angeles,
Right.
in Westminster, and also Santa Clara area. So they had a lot of monovision, blended vision, even plus like a 2 diopter because they want to see very clearly. They don't want to look older. And so I've done, they're very, very happy. But that being said, we are moving more to multifocal lenses. You have to pick the right one and customize it because you need one that has very good ad or they're not going to be happy. But we don't have Presbyon in the US. If we did, we would be using that, unfortunately. But we are very interested in your plus 150 method to test for blended vision. But of course, I can't give Presbyon. So if they pass the plus 150 test and I give them blended vision or monovision, they may not be happy. Is that correct?
Okay, so, but you're correct. They may not be happy, but because Presbyon is about controlling spherical aberration, because the myopia being corrected or the hyperopia being corrected is sometimes leaving the eye in the therapeutic range of spherical aberration, it actually can work very similarly. But it's more random. You don't have control over it, but it can happen. So I think what you're describing is the fact that you've, great techniques that converge around the world and can pop up in different places simultaneously at the same time, and that's what you've done. You've worked out a way of avoiding contact lens monovision trials. You're using a modified, monovision test inside the clinic, and you're doing monovision, and it works very well, and you have really happy patients. So I'm trying to find here the papers because I can just share them here in the chat, our refraction papers. But the course has. Maybe we could arrange for your optometrist to see to go through the London Vision Clinic course online, so they don't have to come to London, or you can send them to London. But because it goes through the exact refraction technique in painstaking detail, and it shows all of the the outcomes, like the data, the proof that it's a good idea. So it's not just saying it; it's actually testing it.
That'd be awesome. And I really encourage you, Professor Reinstein, to come to Vietnam. It's amazing. I've been there many times and I've lectured there. So a lot of the doctors there speak very good English, and their volume of patients is probably a lot higher than almost any center in England, especially, except for maybe Optical Express. That's it. They have tens of thousands, and they do a lot of SMILE and they have different iStar ICL, but they also use the other ICLs, and there's a lot of VisiMax 800s there. So they're very, very, very advanced.
Great.
So maybe we'll go together sometime.
Robert, Lynn.
Well,
Okay.
I don't need a lot of convincing. Summer rolls, I could eat them for breakfast, especially with the fish sauce. Yes. Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
great. So we had a little technical difficulties there before.
So
Is that a question there in Vietnamese?
yeah, in Vietnamese, it's about the cataract. So I think it is not important here.
Well,
Hello, chị Mai ơi, em có câu hỏi được không? Còn giờ
Được
không
rồi,
nhỉ?
đi hỏi đi.
Vâng.
Hỏi nha.
No, it's a very important question. Here's the English translation that I got from my friend here, Chat. Many doctors believe that yellowing of the lens is a crystalline lens means a cataract. And my opinion is very clear on this. If someone has good contrast and their OSI is normal, they don't have a visually significant cataract. I don't care about the color of the lens. I care about visual function. I care about refractive stability, because if someone is myopicizing, if someone has a -1 eye and a -5, and last year they were -1, well, that's a cataract, but that's not the same. So we will perform an extraocular procedure on everyone who doesn't have a cataract, even though they might have a yellow lens, as long as their contrast is normal and their OSI is low. In the US, the OSI, the HD analyzer is not as popular as the eye trace, but the eye trace also does a dysfunctional lens syndrome calculation, which is similar. The Osiris from CSO has something called a MASI, which is the microaberrometric scatter index. So that's also a measurement of opacity of the eye. We use objective measurements of whether the lens is causing visual problems in order to avoid intraocular surgery in someone who may not need it. Intraocular surgery is wonderful, but it's less accurate and it's more risk. So, bottom line is, I don't agree with looking at the slit lamp and say, oh, you have a little bit of cataract, let's take the lens out, because you're going to get a cataract anyway. If you can avoid that nasty complication by 10 years, that's a preference. In the UK, unlike, I think, your part of the world, only 30% of this population has cataract surgery before they die. That's the statistic in the United Kingdom. So to say that you will take the clear lens out now because you won't get a cataract is also disingenuous. It's not accurate. Well, if it's not disingenuous, it's ignorant. I'm not sure which is worse.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Daniel. Thanks so much. Because lots of Vietnamese doctors say that the yellow risk in the crystal lens is equal to cataract, and they don't allow to do the LVC on the yellow risk crystal lens. So that's why I'm asking you this question. Thank you so much for.
But 100% of humans have yellowing of the lens as they get older. So how yellow is yellow? I mean, sure. I mean, let's go to first principles. What is the word cataract? What is that word? In Greek, it means waterfall, meaning the transparency of that water is not there. That's what cataract means in Greek. So if we're going by that definition, if a lens is letting light through and is not scattering light, and you have best spectacle corrected vision maintained, and the contrast is good, and you have a device to show that the scatter is low, how can you call that a cataract? I mean, that is an incorrect use of the word. Now, you could have someone with a low OSI, excellent contrast, -3, 20/16, good contrast, 54-year-old, dilate, boom, spoke. A spoke in the periphery. Now, I have colleagues who will say, nope, got to take it out. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show that picture to the patient and say, look, you have this spoke here, but we don't know how long it's been there. Have you ever been hit in the eye? Oh, yeah, I was hit with a cricket ball. Ah, okay. Well, that explains it. But anyway, and if they say they weren't hit with the cricket ball, I say, look, looks like you're going to need cataract surgery at some point. Maybe, maybe not, but maybe. The center of your vision is totally clear. So you'll have surgeons who will offer you cataract surgery, but it's more risk, less accurate, more side effects, less not adjustable and not reversible. I'm suggesting we do presbyon now. If you get a cataract, well, so be it. But I don't think it's imminent. A spoke is not necessarily going to affect your vision until it's reaching the center of the vision. So if it was my eye, I would have an extraocular procedure first. And we do cataract surgery in our clinic. We're happy to do cataract surgery. We just prefer to reserve the lowest risk procedure for each patient at each stage.
Rồi mời bác sĩ Sâm ạ. Bác sĩ Sâm còn câu hỏi. One more question from Dr. Sâm. Rồi, ông mất tiêu rồi. Bác sĩ Sâm đâu ạ? I think he
that's
left.
me.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Vậy là cũng thời gian cũng gần hết rồi, thì em hỏi một câu hỏi nhanh thôi, tức là quang sai mà sinh ra sau khi phẫu thuật SMILE ấy, kể cả SMILE Pro ấy, nói chung ấy, đặc biệt là lệch tâm ấy, thì mình xử trí thế nào? Thì theo quan điểm của giáo sư, mình nên chọn cái phương pháp hiện nay thì có mấy phương pháp là thang PRK chẳng hạn, hoặc là mình chuyển từ cái SMILE sang flap LASIK với cái cycle option này, và mình sẽ chọn topo guide hay là wayfan guide.
Okay, one question from Dr. Sum. There's a higher order aberration after SMILE or after SMILE. So what will you do to resolve it?
Well, I would only resolve it if it's causing visual problems. So are we talking about a decentration? You know, it depends on what the visual complaint is as to what you will do with higher order aberrations. Measuring higher order aberrations afterwards, and you see coma, and the patient's not complaining, I don't do anything, right? If the contrast is good and the vision's good, there's no need to treat it. But if someone has a decentration, decentrations in SMILE are the surgeon's fault. There's no such thing as the tracker didn't work, right? You pushed the pedal, the eye wasn't in the right place. So you can't shift the blame in SMILE on decentrations. But and we have decentrations. I mean, you know, the eye doesn't fit well and it moves a little bit, and it happens. We do topography guided treatments, you know, with the topography guided system with Zeiss, which is phenomenal, amazing.
Can I offer some advice from my experience? So our clinic's done 27,000 SMILE. We only got approved in 2016. One thing that a lot of people don't know is sometimes for some reason the interface, they don't reconnect well. So if I see a refractive error, loss of BCVA, very early, even in the first month or first week, if I feel like they have an unusual refractive error, I'll just go in with 50% saline and 50% BSS to kind of make the cornea a little bit more steep, edematous. And because striae is very difficult to see when you have a cap versus a flap, then I'll look to see if there's any striae, and I would stretch the length, the cap, you know, stretch it out. And I would say in about 25% of patients, this resolves the issue. And in fact, our enhancement rate for SMILE is so low, it's 0.2%. So whenever I see a case that has an unusual refractive error, I will go ahead and do this. And in 25%, the refractive error improves. We also believe in something called CLAPIX. I don't know if you do, Dan, but
no.
It's worked well anecdotally, and it helps in about 25% of patients too.
Yeah. And
that's just to make it's just to use a contact lens over the eye and use no steroids, just antibiotic, and use an NSAID. And we leave that on for 6 weeks, but we put them on antibiotic coverage to prevent infection. And anecdotally, we had a patient where there was an overcorrection in one eye, and the other eye didn't, and we were able to do this, and it actually resolved. But
Yep.
now that was a long time ago. So with
Yep.
epithelial mapping and all that, we can find out more information. But these are some things, just talk about the cap. Those are important things to irrigate, and I think that may be helpful as a suggestion.
Right.
Because in this case, you're not doing any sort of surgery. Now, if they still persist, then we'll start doing a LASIK enhancement and correct
okay.
these
So
problems.
okay, we're going way off piste here. But I'm just gonna so the way I qualify this is we haven't done 24,000, but we've done 15,000. And if you go to our textbook, our standard technique means that never a cap leaves the OR that hasn't been already perfectly distended. So what you're talking about is taking the lenticule out, and then the cap is not distended. But the standard technique that we teach is to go to the slit lamp in the OR, put fluorescein in, and you can see the pattern of the non-distension of the cap. The cap does have more length than the bed, so you need to put the redundant cap into the periphery. And so we have the technique of pushing and basically distending the cap so that the microfold is in the periphery. And we do that for every single eye. Now, we learned to do that in the early days because we were having problems with patients that had slow visual recovery. And we did look at epithelial maps and found that it was very irregular. And we did realize that it was the stromal surface. And we did realize that we should have distended the caps. So quite early in our SMILE learning curve, we introduced cap distension as the last part of the SMILE process. So I would say that everything you're saying works, but we're preventing it from, we don't need claptics or that, what's that called? That like big contact lens?
Carol manipulator?
Yeah,
Carol
like
manipulator.
it squashes
The
the
little round
cornea.
thing?
Yeah, whatever. You don't need any of that. You just need a sponge and a microscope, and you put everything back. But these are great discussions that go hand in hand with you know, the 4-day intensive course that we teach once a year in London. I'll just put the link there again. And I think that it might be of quite a lot of interest for some of you to take this course online, unless you want to come to London, which is more fun. Because everything we've discussed today is discussed in more detail. And, you know, around the world, people, you know, smart people like Robert will find solutions to problems that because they have a mind that can do that. They have a mind that can do things. And then what we feel that we've done over the last 15, 20 years we've been doing SMILE is that we've been, not 2015, is we've gathered everything that we've ever heard or learned about it, and then thought about how to prevent it or how to treat it. And the SMILE textbook, which we published a few years ago, even though it was before the VisuMax 800, it's still a refractive surgery textbook of all of the principles of refraction, patient counseling, consent. I mean, you know, every single little aspect of refractive surgery is included in that textbook. I will never, ever, don't say ever, do another textbook again. It was like so much work. Guide to, because it was so much work. But I got to tell you, it was, here it is. It was worth it, because it really enabled us to help as many people as possible get to expert level without doing a formal fellowship.
This book is excellent. I've read this cover to cover, and all our SMILE surgeons have read it too. And the videos in there are excellent.
It's got 16 hours of video, narrated, you know, with the same obsessionality that this webinar had. So it is, yeah, hopefully a labor of love, but there we go.
It's a labor of love for sure.
It was a labor of love. In fact, George Waring, so in the foreword to the book, I wrote that I based the book on 2 other books that I think are, you know, phenomenal. One was George Waring's RK book, and the other one was David Chang's FACO book. And David Chang's FACO book with his, narrated videos with exquisite detail in describing what's happening. And George, going to the basics and covering everything from refraction to everything. So, that's how it was based on. It's like those two heroes provided the template for this textbook. Yeah. Okay, so should we? I've recorded this. I'm gonna pass this on to Zeiss. I don't know how they can distribute it to everybody, but you can then hopefully watch this again. In fact, I'll put it on Reinstein Institute YouTube, so you can watch it straight away as well if you want. But there we are.
So thank you again for taking your time with us.
Thank you.
Hope to see you
Dan.
next time.
Thank you, Robert. Good to see you, Robert.